Hey, Banjo and Kazooie are in Smash now! Listen, I know that was 6 years ago, but it's not like anything else has happened with these two since then. Microsoft owns the Baron Bird these days and cares enough about them to get them into Smash, and to give us Kazooie and Threeie on NSO, but not enough to do anything new with them. If you're a fan of the series and want more content, there's really nowhere to look but backwards into their undersized catalog. Rare was acquired by Microsoft in late 2002, and while their home console games more or less immediately became Xbox exclusives, they did still manage to put out a handful of titles for Nintendo's handhelds in the following years. A lot of these were ports, like the Donkey Kong Country trilogy making its way to GBA, or Diddy Kong Racing getting a port to the DS. Thankfully though, we did get a few original projects during this time, including a brand new entry in the Banjo-Kazooie series, Grunty's Revenge. Banjo-Kazooie Grunty's Revenge released in 2003 as the third entry in the at-the-time booming Banjo series. 3 years after Banjo-Tooie and a full year into Rare's change in ownership, this game hit the Game Boy Advance to relatively little fanfare and some middle-of-the-road reviews. I think most fans of the series know about this one by now, but in case you don't, this is an attempt by Rareware to take a proper entry in the Banjo series and cram it into a Game Boy Advance cartridge. Is Grunty's Revenge the real Banjo-Threeie? Nah, we're not gonna do that. Yeah, this game came out after Tooie, but it actually takes place between Kazooie and Tooie, so if anything it's more like Banjo 1.5e. Then again, it's actually a time travel plot, with the bulk of the game taking place before Kazooie, so you could say this game is Banjo Zero. Let's just keep calling it Grunty's Revenge though, since that's what it says on the title screen. 2 months after the events of Banjo-Kazooie, with Gruntilda still trapped under that boulder, it all suddenly becomes clear to her. The simplest solution to her current predicament is to release her soul from her body, possess a mech, kidnap Kazooie, and then time travel into the past to prevent the duo that defeated her from ever meeting. This is her plan A before calling her sisters for help. And girl, I get it, I hate asking for help too. Mumbo Jumbo overhears Gruntilda's plans and, as he has always been capable of doing, sends Banjo back in time to rescue Kazooie and stop Grunty once again. The plot definitely isn't the strong point in this game, and I don't know, that's fine with me. I'm not here for the deep Banjo lore. I'm here for the and the bree and the and that's what this game's got for me. The Banjo-Kazooie games are all about running around levels collecting notes and jiggies, and this game is no different. In order to make the 3D platformer collectathon gameplay of Kazooie and Tooie work on the Game Boy Advance, Rare opted for a top-down isometric perspective to create a pretty convincing feeling of 3D depth. They've gone with pre-rendered 3D graphics, sort of like Donkey Kong Country, with Banjo, Kazooie, and many of the other characters' models being straight out of the N64 games. This approach definitely has its drawbacks. It can sometimes be difficult to tell how tall a piece of terrain is if you can't see both its top and its base, for example. The camera feels pretty zoomed in, and the fixed angle means that you have a limited view of what's around you. Still, I think this game works around its limitations very well. A drop shadow under Banjo goes a long way to help judge your position in the air, and the environments are laid out in ways that tend to keep the more elevated terrain at the far end of the stages where it can't block your view. With the Game Boy Advance having fewer buttons to work with compared to the Nintendo 64, it's not surprising that Banjo and Kazooie's moveset is a little bit pared down here compared to previous games. I do think the developers managed to keep the most important bits though, and it all works surprisingly well with only 4 buttons. A jumps, B is attack, and L is crouch, with things like the Talon Trot and Flap Flip being activated with crouch plus another button, just like in the N64 games. As a side effect of that time travel spell, Banjo's forgotten most of his moves from the previous games, and you'll have to unlock them again with Bozai, an ancestor of models. He'll hold moves at a note-based ransom, a cultural tradition amongst moles, but I never really found this to be a problem. If you're like me and can't not collect everything in a level, you'll always have enough notes by the time you find his molehills, if not very shortly after. You also start out with just Banjo this time, since Grunty kidnaps Kazooie in the intro. You'll reunite the duo midway through the second level though, so your moveset only stays bare bones just long enough for you to get used to the game. Speaking of levels, let's speak about the levels. It's a much smaller adventure this time around, with only 5 worlds to explore, plus the hub of Spiral Mountain, which is kind of a world itself. Each of these worlds, Spiral Mountain included, hosts the usual 10 jiggies and 100 notes. Note collection here is persistent, like Tooie or the XBLA port of Kazooie, which is greatly appreciated. The locations here aren't really breaking any new ground with their theming. Maybe out of an effort to make sure this game fit in with the established Banjo style, most of the levels take clear inspiration from levels out of the previous games. Breagle Beach is Treasure Trove Cove, Spiller's Harbor is Rusty Bucket Bay, and Freezing Furnace is Hailfire Peaks, with the fireside outright being called Grunty Industries. Visually, I didn't really mind this, since the shift to 2D creates a meaningful enough difference in the look of these levels. What I did find a little more distracting was the soundtrack. Grant Kirkhope didn't return to score this game, but I think composer Jamie Hughes did a solid job at emulating the established sound of the series. There's definitely a few spots where things sound a bit too similar to existing tracks, though. It could be intentional referencing or quoting of Kirkhope's compositions intended as fan service, but it does sometimes feel like we're getting discount versions of those original tracks. Breagle Beach's music is pretty evidently trying to match the feel of Treasure Trove Cove, and the track inside of Freezing Furnace's Grunty Industries room sure does remind me of Pterodactyland. Again, I don't think this is bad necessarily. I just would have preferred if the game explored more original settings and sounds like they did with the opening level, Cliff Farm. Earning Jiggies is done more or less the same way as it is in the previous games. Some of them are just sitting around, some are held by NPCs who will hand them over in exchange for a favor, and some are rewards for completing a minigame. Those minigames are pretty contentious from what little I've heard about this game, but I didn't find them to be a problem myself. There's only really 3 of them: fishing, sliding, and a top-down boating thing. You'll encounter these 3 with changes in theming and difficulty throughout the game, and it's probably the fishing one that's the hardest to get a handle on. Still, once you do get a feel for it, it's not all that hard. I also found the slides to be pretty easy, and the boat-based ones are either easy or can be cheesed. It's probably the repetition and not so much the difficulty that people take issue with. I could see these getting really frustrating if you wound up having to try them multiple times. Thankfully though, I managed to pass each of them within 1 or 2 attempts in my playthrough. One last thing this game carries over from the previous games is Mumbo Jumbo's transformations. I'm not sure how old this guy is canonically, but he exists in this past time period as well, and he's looking more or less the same, so maybe he just doesn't age? After picking up a Mumbo token, you can take it to Mumbo's Bachelor Pad, and it'll unlock one of the 4 new transformations. Unlike the previous games, though, you can actually use any of the transformations in any level once you've unlocked them, which I thought had a lot of potential for interesting Jiggy setups across levels. It doesn't come up too often, with only 1 instance of a Jiggy requiring a transformation from a later level, but there are a few times when a previous level's transformation will come in handy. I also just think this game's new forms are really good ones. Mouse Banjo is super cute, and Candle Banjo is a pretty creative choice. Probably the weakest part of this game for me was the endgame. After you open up Gruntilda's lair, you head into a gauntlet of the same 2 bosses you've already fought several times throughout the game, with the traditional quiz segments in between each phase, and a slightly changed up Mecha Grunty fight to cap things off. The bosses themselves are pretty easy, though Klungo's invisibility can give him a cheap hit here or there. The quiz segments, though, can either be quick and painless or grueling depending on what questions you roll. Instead of simple trivia, sometimes you'll be asked, "Can you beat this game?" and be thrown into one of those minigames. These not only break the pace of this part of the game, but some of them can actually damage you, and the damage sticks after the minigame ends. I got good luck with not rolling too many of these, but rolling more than 1 across these quiz segments would be super frustrating. Still, the journey up to that point is a really enjoyable one. It obviously doesn't reach the highs of its predecessors, but the game has held up surprisingly well for what it is. I'm glad the team took the isometric approach instead of just trying to turn this game into a standard 2D platformer, and I think they succeeded at recreating a lot of what I love about the Banjo games. Would I have preferred a fully 3D game? Sure, but I also really like what we got here, and the novelty of it being done on the Game Boy Advance really elevates it for me. This is another short one, about 5 hours even for 100%, and I think it's worth that time. Check this one out if you're into the Banjo games, or just collectathon platformers in general.